Hello everybody, good afternoon. I am happy to talk about my paper, Really They Hate Farming, Challenging Dominant Orthodoxies on Filipino Youth's Perceptions on Rice Farming. This paper is co-authored with my supervisor. She's the co-director of the Center for Communication and Social Change at the University of Queensland, Associate Professor Elske van de Vliet. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be taking you through the introduction of my paper, where I'm going to be talking about rural youth out-migration and the need to rethink. My main arguments, materials and methods, results and discussion, proposal for youth engagement, and conclusions. There are two main arguments that I would expound on in this paper. The first is perceptions that cast so much negative light on youth's indirect or direct participation in rice farming should be reviewed, if not abandoned. Second, while it is true that it is difficult to directly engage the youth in rice farming, indirect engagement is entirely possible and should be encouraged. The Department of Labor and Employment in 2010 said that young individuals comprise 35% of all the overseas Filipino workers. And it is a trend that as young individuals get some education, they take on jobs in key cities. And this phenomenon is more palpably observed among women than in men. Hence the phenomenon called masculinization of rural areas and the feminization of urban areas. Scholars now believe that there is a massive exodus of young individuals away from the rice farm. And this can partly be validated by the fact that there is a decreasing enrollment in agriculture courses, even in top-ranking universities in the country. This, of course, this dominant belief has resulted in at least two consequences. First is the fear that we might have a scarcity of future food producers. And second is the minimal to zero engagement of youth in rice farming. But there are some things that need some thinking here. First, when we say living rural areas, is it appropriate to equate that to having no interest in rice farming? And second, when we say interest in farming, is it appropriate to equate that solely to direct involvement in farm work? How about indirect involvement in farm work? These two questions set the scene to challenge dominant orthodoxy, saying that the youth don't care about farming and the youth cannot be engaged in any efforts in relation to rice farming. Hence, we have this research puzzle. We ask this question. Is it really a case that they don't want to farm, or they just want to do farming differently? To put my arguments into proper context, I would like to introduce you to the three youth categories. First, we have the leavers. These are those who will leave the rural areas. And we have the returners. They may have left the rural area, but they will be coming back after some time. And we have the will stay no matter what. They love the rural areas, they will be there, let's leave them alone. And the need to rethink is of course fueled by the two phenomena happening in the Philippines these days. We have the youth bulge, or the preponderance of young individuals whose age range from 15 to 24 years old. According to the National Youth Commission, we have 21 million of them in 2010. And we are talking here of the sophisticated and educated Filipino youth. We know for a fact that the literacy rates of Filipinos are among the highest in the developing world. The next phenomenon is the massive development in ICTs in the Philippines, or the Information and Communications Technology. We are talking here of the Philippines as the SMS capital of the world. There are a lot of surveys which say that Filipinos can't sleep well if their mobile phones are not within easy reach. And we are the social networking capital of the world. We form 250 million of the 750 million Facebook users worldwide. And take note, we've got digital divide issues in the Philippines with less than 10% internet penetration, and yet we are the social networking capital of the world. And you probably have heard as well of the Twitterati phenomenon. We can form a thread in Twitter. We're among the top 10 users of Twitter worldwide. And of course, the book Digital Review of Asia and the Pacific noted that the Philippines is among the countries with the most innovative ICT applications. The e-everything phenomenon is here. We've got a plethora of ICT applications. Given these two phenomena, Of course, the question you should ask is, what will you do with that? Of course, we need to reflect on the opportunities that we can get from these two phenomena. I did this research, in Aurora and in Albay. I sought help from Children International in seeking participants for Albay and the then Open Academy for Philippine Agriculture for Aurora, with 6 to 8 research participants. These are all farmers' children from both the upland and lowland communities in Aurora. I thought I might have to go through this very quickly since there are a lot of positivists in the room. This is a qualitative approach. Interpretivism, if you've heard of that. I'm interested to know about the lived experiences of the research participants, their worldview. And we know that interpretive approaches see people and their interpretations, perceptions, meanings, and understanding as a primary data sources. And of course, the methods used, we know this, the methods used depend on the questions we ask. Methods. I use time transect. This is a good method to know how one allocates his or her time in a given period. In my case, it was over a week's time. Mobility mapping, it is a good method to evaluate the places that one usually visits in a week. Photo voice, it is a good method to, to let the participants tell you what they usually do, to tell their stories by taking photos. And after the participants did all these methods, I had them report in a group discussion, so data validation happens right there and then. And I also needed to interview all 6 of them for this paper. Analysis, if you're interested, of course, I went through transcription of recorded interviews, group discussion, grouping to describe data into different categories, and the regrouping and reducing, so the data is more accessible. Participants were asked to sign informed consent letters prior to their participation. They were also allowed to withdraw their participation at any point without any obligation. They were given IDs for the interview transcription, and of course, careful not to mention their names in the manuscript. Of course, I needed to go through this one because it's a basic requirement in doing any research that will involve humans. I am now ready to tell you what I found in this research. And I know, before that, I'd like to tell you that this part is divided into 2. First one is the rethinking use perceptions part, and the second section is the info-mediary proposal, which is an offshoot of the analysis made in the first section. And the rethinking use perception is divided into 3 themes. These are sometime on the farm, heart for the farming family, and the vision for the farm. What you see now is a mobility map of one of the upland research participants in Aurora. And I'd like to highlight the fact that despite him being in school, he still manages to go to the rice farm every day. And this is sort of representative of all the mobility maps that I got in Aurora, especially in the uplands. And it's also worth noting that across the provinces, these kids were actually involved in discussing rice farming in their families. They participate in the decision making. This is something that is, I observed more probably among participants in Albay rather than in Aurora. And this, of course, can be explained by the fact that Albay has better access to information owing to its proximity to key cities in the Bicol region, such as Legazpi and Naga City. And also, albeit light issues only, most of these research participants discuss rice farming among their peers. They talk about how they could be employed during transplanting period and what are they going to do after harvest time. While the research participants were very much involved in rice farming in different ways, it would be naive not to talk about the negative perceptions that are attached to rice farming. And this can be divided into 3 categories: studies related, familial restrictions, and drudgery of doing farm work. When we talk of studies, it is not something that's very difficult to understand. As much as they like to, give it all, give their 100% to rice farming, they just could not do it owing to the fact that, owing to their busy, hectic schedule in school. And familial restrictions. The parents don't want their children to go to farming. By all means, don't go to farming. You can take nursing, ICT, but no, not agriculture. This is something, again, that is not difficult to understand. If you try to think of an average Filipino farmer earning 118 pesos daily, which is hardly enough to make both ends meet, so to speak. The drudgery of doing farm work will be captured by the following quotes from the beauty-obsessed youth. They talk of those who are dark will even be darker because of farming, and it's so hot, Mom, I can't do this anymore. Remember, Bicol region is the home of Venus rock, and it makes my fingernails dirty, so dark, referring to picking up a golden apple snails. In a country that values whiter skin complexion, they certainly will have issues with rice farming. But suffice it to say that in this theme, the youth was able to prove that they're involved in farming in one way or another. And they're happy with it. And this is something that I'd like to talk more on the next theme, which is the heart for the farming family. What you see here are two unique time transects. And I'd like to highlight the fact that they study a lot. Roughly about 20 to 30% of their time weekly was actually spent on studying. They value education, and valuing education, as we know, is not a new theme in youth research, especially when you do research on the Filipino youth. And why would these young individuals value education? Love of family is probably a plausible answer. This is a photo voice output of one of the research participants in Albay. She had her picture taken in front of a sari-sari store. She told us that she wanted to make it big someday. She works hard, she studies hard, just so she could contribute to the wealth of the family, and so, just so she could contribute to the wealth of the family. They want to make the lives of their parents more comfortable. They want to buy beautiful houses, not just a beautiful house, but it should be a beautiful house with a swimming pool. And you'll probably like this one. This is a picture of a plastic flower taken by one of the research participants in Aurora. This is a plastic flower to symbolize love that never dies. This is probably the raison d'etre of most of us, to love our family. It is the same love that pushes them to work hard. It is the same love that pushes them to contribute to the wealth of the family just so they could give a more beautiful life. But then again, if you step back, what is a more beautiful life in the first place? Is it something that is completely removed from rice farming? Is it something that will put rice farming in another life perspective? Not quite, I guess, especially if you hear them say that once a farmer, always a farmer. Roughly about 11% of the participants said that. While it is true that most of them will be leaving the country, most of them will be nurses, ICT specialists, seafarers, they will be in the United States, in the UK, anywhere but in the Philippines. They will confound the Filipino diaspora problem. But living rice farming is far from possible. It is something that they cannot do. Because to them, rice farming has already developed a symbolic value. So symbolic that they can't detach themselves away from it. Like this one. Many of them would like to buy a coconut farm someday. As in Aurora, this was a photo was output of one of the research participants in Aurora. They like to buy a coconut farm because in Aurora, coconut farming is more profitable than rice farming. And many of them would also like to buy a rice farm, not because they want to till the land, but because they want to employ poor relatives. So if you step back, young individuals are probably just like you and me. They have other dreams, they have other passions. But severing ties to rice farming is something that is not very easy for them to do. I, for instance, am passionate about performing my role as development communicator, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't care less about what's happening in rice farming in the Philippines. So I tried to step back. What did I get from this research? I think that it is apt for us to regard the youth as future rice farming investors, instead of ignoring their potential involvement solely because of their expressed intent to leave the country. Financing the input-intensive rice farming operations is something that the educated youth can do. They will have the goods later. They will be a nurse in the US, they can send in remittances so the poor relatives can farm. Programs to engage the youth will enable them to do that in the future. And direct involvement at this point can be a fantasy. They're still in school, but indirect involvement is the way to go, and it should be encouraged. Let me now go to the second part of my results and discussion, which is a proposal on how to indirectly engage the youth in rice farming. This is a good magulang po, mobilizing the youth to serve as intermediaries for rice farmers. What are infomediaries? Infomediaries are ICT literate people who access ICTs for those who can't access them. Why do we need infomediaries? In the Philippines, we have ICT applications. We have e-Rice Calendar, we have the Pinoy Rice Knowledge Bank info hubs, such as the websites of PhilRice, ERI, the DA. We have the Pinoy Rice Knowledge Bank, which contains practically everything one has to know about rice farming in the Philippines. That's on the other side. And the rice farmer is on the other side. But before the farmer could benefit from these ICT-based initiatives, he needs to grapple with a lot of issues. Access, ICT anxiety, refilling of discomfort when in front of the computer, computer and functional illiteracies, poverty, and inadequate time. You need an infomediary so the farmer can break through these barriers. You need infomediaries so the farmers could still stand to optimize these ICT-based applications. What are the bases for the infomediary proposals? I've got two. First, these are two unique mobility maps. And I'd like to highlight the fact that they're always in computer shops. Having said that, the access problem will be solved. ICT anxiety will be solved. And ICT anxiety will be solved. And computer and functional illiteracies will be solved. Imagine that. And the second point is mobile phone addiction. These are three unique time transects. And I'd like to highlight the fact that texting is something that occupies most of their time in a week. Mobile phone addiction is very obvious here. I text daily, often up to 7 hours till midnight, or even until dawn, until 3 a.m. And roughly, they send on the average 200 text messages daily, the SMS capital of the world. They spend so much on mobile phones that if you try to have a rough assessment of how much they spend in a week, you may not like my analysis, but it's almost equal to 2 kilograms of rice. I'm trying to present now the infomediary continuum. This is the working framework of the infomediary campaign that I'm doing in Aurora now. Of course, you have the must-haves. You need at least to have a decent access, a decent computer access point in the area. You need to have a conducive environment. I found in Aurora, for instance, that although they got a computer laboratory in their school, the students could not access the computer every day because there's a rule which says that you cannot access the computer if there's no teacher who's going to accompany you to use that. But the teachers are always busy. So more often, the students could also not use the computer. So there should be a conducive environment for them to learn how to use the computer. Support platforms. We want the students to go to the website of PhilRice, of ERI, of DA. So there must be something in there. Games probably, or quiz, on all these things, all the edutainment functions should be in place. Awareness. We need to take this seriously. This needs to be taken into the classroom. So you need to add a module in a technology livelihood education. I'm seeing this from the framework of the technical vocational school. This is how they do it. This is the old technology and home economics subject. You need to have a module there on how to become an infomediary. And of course, conscientization approach. The youth should know that they can do something for their parents, and the parents should know that their children can do something for them. The activities to prompt actions. These are basically motivations for them to perform infomediary roles. The BTC fanatic, the PhilRice Tech Center fanatic, those who send in the most number of pertinent text queries. The wizard, those who will get the highest score in the quiz that we're going to give. The highest builder, and the Facebooker of the year, because we're going to make a Facebook specifically for the young individuals. Beyond optimism, there are good reasons to believe that prevailing notions that cast so much negative doubt on youth's potential involvement in rice farming should be reviewed, if not abandoned. The fear that the youth might abandon farming one day might easily happen if we will not engage them. And the proposal to mobilize the youth as infomediaries for their parents, which was drawn from the findings of this study, can, if proven effective, serve as a new strategy and extension. In closing, I'd like to reiterate the question that I asked earlier. Is it really a case that they don't want to farm, or they just want to do farming differently? Thank you.